There is a kind of danger that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up with hostility on its face or cruelty in its voice. It comes wearing warmth. It comes with a smile, with helpfulness, with words that sound like exactly what you needed to hear. And by the time you realize something is wrong, it's already gotten close enough to do damage. Islam speaks directly to this reality. The Prophet ﷺ didn't just warn us about open enemies. He warned us about those who sit at our table, who share our company, who walk beside us daily while carrying intentions we can't immediately see, because evil in real life is rarely obvious. It's subtle, it's patient, and it knows how to look like something else. The Quran tells us clearly, and among the people is he whose speech pleases you in worldly life, and he calls Allah to witness as to what is in his heart. Yet he is the fiercest of opponents. Surah Al-Baqarah 2 to 204. Sweet speech, dangerous heart. That's the profile we need to recognize. Today we're going to look at 10 signs, real and specific signs that Islam identifies that may indicate there is an evil person in your life. Not to make you paranoid, not to make you suspicious of everyone, but to give you the clarity that protects you, because protection begins with awareness, and awareness begins with knowing what to look for. Pay close attention. What you learn here could spare you months or years of unnecessary harm. Sign 1, they take pleasure in other people's pain. This is perhaps the clearest mark of a corrupted heart, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. When someone in your life receives difficult news, what does this person do? Do they express genuine sorrow? Do they offer help? Or do you notice something else? Something small but unmistakable, a slight lift in their energy, a barely suppressed satisfaction. Evil individuals find nourishment in the suffering of others. It might express itself overtly through mockery or unkind comments when someone fails. Or it might be subtle through the way their eyes light up when bad news is shared, through the speed with which they forward bad news to others, through the slight delay before their sympathy arrives, as if they had to locate it and drag it forward rather than feel it naturally. The Prophet ﷺ gave us a standard that makes this sign easy to measure. None of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. Sahih al-Bukhari 13, Sahih Muslim 45. Think about what that means practically. A true believer wants for others the same good they want for themselves. Success, ease, happiness, health. They rejoice at the good fortune of others because the brotherhood and sisterhood of faith makes others' joy feel like their own. An evil person experiences the exact inversion. They feel diminished by others' success and relieved by others' failure. This isn't merely a character flaw, it's a sign of serious spiritual disease. Watch carefully how someone speaks about people who are doing well. Watch how they respond when someone who was struggling turns their situation around. Watch what they say and how they say it when news of someone's misfortune arrives. The heart is almost always visible in those unguarded moments before the performance catches up. If someone in your life consistently seems energized by the difficulties of others rather than moved to compassion by them, that is not a small thing. That is a window into what they carry. Sign 2, they change faces depending on who is watching. There is a person you know perhaps who is charming and gracious in certain company and reveals themselves to be something entirely different when that company changes. They are generous with their boss and contemptuous toward people they consider beneath them. They speak well of you to your face and differently about you when you're not there. Their personality doesn't have a center, it has audiences. This is what the Prophet ﷺ identified as one of the most dangerous personality types. The worst of all people is the double-faced one who comes to some people with one face and to others with another. Sahih al-Bukhari 6058. The person who has two faces has no face. They don't have a true self that they carry into every room. They have a strategy, a social performance calibrated for maximum benefit in each setting. And because their behavior is always calculated rather than sincere, you can never know which version is real. You can never know what they say about you when the audience shifts. This is more than a social annoyance. It creates a specific kind of harm to those close to such a person. You lose the ability to know where you stand. You lose the foundation of clear, reliable trust that healthy relationships require. You're always slightly off balance, always catching inconsistencies, always wondering which version of this person is the one you're actually dealing with today. The sign to watch for: their behavior changes dramatically depending on who else is present. They treat certain people differently when those people have status or resources. They say things to you about others that you suspect they say about you to others. Their warmth runs directly proportional to their perceived benefit. A sincere person behaves with fundamental consistency regardless of who is watching, because they are not performing for an audience. They are simply being who they are. That consistency is rare, and it's one of the markers that distinguishes genuine character from strategic performance. Sign 3. Their kindness has conditions you aren't told about. Conditional kindness is among the most deceptive qualities an evil person can possess, because from the outside it looks like generosity. They do favors, they help, they show up and offer and give, but there's something underneath all of it that you sense before you can fully name. Their generosity is never quite free. It's always followed eventually by something: an expectation of loyalty, a future ask, a withdrawal of warmth the moment you decline to serve their interests. Their kindness was never about you. It was about what you could eventually provide. Allah addressed this exact character in the Quran: and of the people is he whose speech pleases you in worldly life, and he calls Allah to witness as to what is in his heart. Yet he is the fiercest of opponents. Surah Al-Baqarah 2 to 204. The voice is smooth, the heart is hostile. The problem is the gap between what is displayed and what is true. The specific test for this quality is time and the removal of benefit. When you are useful to such a person, they are warm, present, and attentive. When circumstances change and you can no longer serve their purposes, when you set a limit they didn't expect or decline something they wanted, watch what happens. The performance ends. The mask shifts. The warmth evaporates with a speed that reveals it was never rooted in anything real. True kindness, the kind Islam asks believers to practice, is not an investment made in anticipation of return. It is given for the sake of Allah, which means it doesn't depend on the recipient's continued usefulness. It extends to the person who cannot reciprocate. It persists through inconvenience. It doesn't come with unspoken bills attached. If you notice someone's kindness toward you shifts in direct correlation to your usefulness to them, treat that as important information about who you are dealing with. Sign 4. They have no real empathy for human suffering. Empathy is not a weakness. In Islam, it's one of the signs of a healthy spiritual heart. The Prophet ﷺ described the believers as, in their affection, mercy and compassion for each other, they are like a single body. When one part of it hurts, the rest responds with sleeplessness and fever. Sahih al-Bukhari 6011, Sahih Muslim 2586. That's a vivid description. One part hurts, the whole body responds. An evil person doesn't respond this way. When someone around them is struggling, they don't feel it. They are not stirred toward care or action. Instead, they observe the suffering with a kind of flat indifference that, if you're watching closely, occasionally shades into something worse, a quiet satisfaction, an opportunity spotted. This absence of empathy is deeply significant because empathy is one of the mechanisms that keeps human behavior within ethical limits. A person who feels the impact of their actions on others has a natural internal check. A person who feels nothing when others suffer has no such check. They can cause harm without experiencing the internal resistance that normally accompanies it. They can hurt you and move on without the weight that should follow. The danger here is that such people are often skilled at performing empathy. They know the words, they know the appropriate expressions, they understand intellectually what a caring response looks like. So they produce one when it benefits them to do so. But performed empathy and felt empathy behave differently under pressure. When empathy is real, it shows up without calculation. When it's performed, it requires an audience and a reason. Watch what happens when someone is suffering and there's no social reward for appearing to care. Watch what happens when your pain is inconvenient for them. That's when the performance falters and the absence reveals itself. He who does not show mercy to people, Allah will not show him mercy. The Prophet ﷺ made this unambiguous. Mercy is not optional for the believer. Its consistent absence is a warning sign you should not dismiss. Sign 5. They need to control everyone around them. The evil person is not content to manage their own life. They are compelled in a way that feels almost involuntary to extend their influence over the choices, behaviors, and freedoms of the people around them. This can manifest as domination through fear, overt aggression, and intimidation that makes those around them walk carefully, measuring every word and action for potential offense. Or it can be more insidious, a slow, patient erosion of your confidence and independence that leaves you eventually dependent on their judgment in ways you didn't agree to and didn't notice happening. The Prophet ﷺ warned explicitly, beware of oppression, for oppression will be darkness on the day of resurrection. Sahih Muslim 2578. Oppression isn't only military or political. In daily life, it is the suppression of another person's freedom, the imposition of your will where it doesn't belong, the making of yourself a necessary authority in someone else's life through manipulation and pressure. There is something specific to notice in how such a person responds to your independence. When you make a decision without their input, how do they react? When you set a boundary, when you disagree with them, when you pursue something they didn't endorse, what happens? Controlling individuals cannot tolerate self-determination in the people they consider theirs. Your freedom is experienced by them as a kind of defiance. A true believer respects the free will Allah has given to every human being. They offer counsel, they give their honest perspective, they might express disagreement, but they do not take and they do not require control over another person's choices. If someone in your life makes you feel like you are asking for permission for things that are yours to decide, that is not love. That is a form of spiritual and psychological oppression, and Islam tells you clearly, distance yourself from it. Sign 6. They create division wherever they go. There is a category of harm that is very difficult to trace because it never appears to come from a single source. Friendships fracture, families develop tensions that seem to arrive from nowhere. Teams at work fall into conflict, and if you trace the threads carefully enough, a single figure appears at the center of every unraveling. This person is described in the Quran with a specificity that suggests Allah knows exactly how this type operates. And do not obey every worthless habitual swearer, a scorner, going about with malicious gossip. Surah Al-Qalam 68 to 10 to 11. The gossip is the mechanism, the division is the goal, and the pleasure they take in watching what they've caused is the fuel that keeps them going. The Prophet ﷺ was even more direct. Shall I not tell you of the worst among people? They are those who go around with gossip, causing conflict between loved ones, and who seek to harm the innocent. Musnad Ahmad 17,799. The worst of people. Not merely flawed, not merely difficult, among the worst. Why such severity? Because the harm done by a sower of division is not direct and singular, it multiplies. One family fractured affects children, grandchildren, an entire network of relationships. One friendship destroyed, one team broken, one community divided. The damage radiates outward far beyond the original act. And the person who caused it often escapes accountability precisely because no one can point to a single deed. They only whispered. They only shared what they heard. They only expressed concern. Watch for the person who seems to be present at the origin point of every conflict in your circle. Watch for the one who brings you information about what others said about you, framed in ways that invite your hurt and anger. Watch for the one whose stories always seem to leave someone looking worse than they probably deserved. That pattern is not coincidence, it is method. Sign 7, they never truly forgive anything. People make mistakes. This is not a failure of humanity, it is the human condition. What differentiates people is how they respond to being wronged, whether they can move through the hurt toward restoration or whether they store the offense indefinitely, maintaining the wound as a resource to be deployed later. An evil person cannot let go, not because they are incapable of moving on, but because they have no interest in doing so. The offense, real or imagined, becomes a possession. It becomes power, holding it over someone, never quite explicitly enough to be called vindictive, but always present enough to be felt, is a way of maintaining control. They may accept apologies, they may say they've forgiven, but watch how the past reappears. Watch how, during future conflicts, things you thought were resolved suddenly return as evidence. Watch how their version of what happened seems to grow darker and more definitive with time rather than softer. Allah teaches us, and let them pardon and overlook. Would you not like that Allah should forgive you? And Allah is forgiving and merciful. Surah Al-Ala 24-22. The person who cannot forgive has placed their injury above the command of Allah. They have declared that their hurt is more important than the mercy Allah instructs His creation to practice. And they have chosen the toxicity of permanent resentment over the liberation of genuine release. The Prophet ﷺ defined strength in a way that directly addresses this. The strong person is not the one who can overpower others, but the one who controls himself when he is angry. Sahih al-Bukhari 6114. Vindictiveness is weakness parading as justice. It is the inability to trust Allah with the accounting of wrongs, combined with an obsession with ensuring personal retribution. If you are in relationship with someone whose catalogue of grievances never closes, who seems to collect offenses rather than release them, understand that the danger is real. That catalogue will one day include you. Sign 8. They study you in order to use you. This is the most intimate betrayal and often the last one to be recognized. They listened closely, not out of care, but out of calculation. They remembered what you told them about your fears, your insecurities, your past failures, your deep hopes, and they filed all of it carefully, and then over time they used it. Subtly at first in ways that felt like they just knew you well, then more directly in ways that left you wondering how you ended up in positions that seemed to consistently benefit them at your expense. Allah warns us about those who present one face in public and another in private, and when they meet those who believe, they say, "We believe," but when they are alone with their evil ones, they say, "Indeed, we are with you." Surah Al-Baqarah 214. These are people who know how to perform the right relationship. They know the language of friendship, of brotherhood, of sisterhood. They deploy it precisely and strategically. And underneath it, they are building a file. The Prophet ﷺ gave us a sharp principle that speaks directly to this. A believer is not stung from the same hole twice. Sahih al-Bukhari 6133, Sahih Muslim 2998. Not stung twice, which implies the first sting happens. You will not always see this kind of person coming. But once you recognize the pattern, once you see that your vulnerabilities seem to surface in situations that benefit them, once you notice that your openness has been returned with exploitation rather than care, you are not obligated to remain in reach. The specific behavior to watch for: they encourage you to open up, then bring it back to you under pressure. They know your insecurities and reference them during conflict. They offer help in ways that create dependency rather than strength. They take from your generosity without appreciation and always seem to find more to take. Distance yourself. Protect not from bitterness but from wisdom. And be deliberate about who earns access to the deeper parts of your inner life. Sign 9. They show no remorse for the harm they cause. There is a mechanism in the human heart that was placed there by design. When we harm someone, whether deliberately or carelessly, something is supposed to respond. Guilt, regret, the desire to repair. That mechanism is one of the things that keeps human behavior aligned with conscience. An evil person's mechanism is broken, or it has been silenced through years of choosing not to hear it. The Prophet ﷺ described the spiritual anatomy of this. When a person commits a sin, a black mark appears on his heart. If he repents, the mark is removed. But if he continues, the marks increase until the heart is entirely covered. Sunan ibn Majah 4244. Covered, sealed off from its own signals, unable to receive the feedback that should cause a change in course. This is why the person who shows no remorse is genuinely dangerous. They are not simply someone who did something wrong and doesn't feel bad about it in this one instance. They are someone whose internal correction system has been deactivated. They will do it again because they received no signal that stopped them the first time. Watch not just for whether they apologize, but for whether the apology carries any behavioral weight. A sincere apology changes behavior. An insincere one is a social strategy deployed to reset the relationship and enable the next offense. Watch also for how they respond when confronted. The person without remorse almost never simply acknowledges what they did. They redirect, they minimize, they find someone else to blame. They turn your confrontation into an offense against them. They make you feel guilty for raising it. By the end of the conversation, if you're not careful, you're apologizing to them. The most hated person to Allah is the one who is always argumentative and stubborn in falsehood. Sahih al-Bukhari 2457. Someone who cannot take accountability, who cannot sit with having caused harm, who always has an explanation that makes them innocent, cannot be trusted to treat you well over time, because there is no consequence they experience for mistreatment. Sign 10. Being around them drains your spirit. This final sign is not always about a specific incident. It's about the cumulative effect of sustained exposure to someone whose spiritual orientation is opposed to yours. You leave time with them feeling heavy. Not immediately, perhaps. Sometimes it happens gradually. A slow depletion you don't notice until you're significantly emptier than when you started. The joy that was there before the conversation is less visible after it. The clarity you had about something feels muddied. The faith that felt accessible feels somehow less present. This is not imagination. The Prophet ﷺ gave us the clearest possible description of this dynamic. The example of a good companion and a bad companion is like that of the seller of musk and the one who blows the bellows. The seller of musk will either give you some as a gift, or you will buy some, or you will smell a pleasant fragrance from him. But the one who blows the bellows will either burn your clothes, or you will notice a foul smell. Sahih al-Bukhari 5534, Sahih Muslim 2628. Either the fragrance reaches you or the smoke does. There is no neutral. Prolonged proximity to someone shapes you in one direction or another. Allah gave this command in the Quran, and be patient yourself with those who call upon their Lord in the morning and the evening, seeking His face. And let not your eyes pass beyond them, desiring adornments of worldly life. And do not obey one whose heart we have made heedless of our remembrance, and who follows his desire and whose affair is ever in neglect. Surah Al-Kahf 1828. Stay with those who draw you toward Allah. Distance yourself from those whose presence draws you away from His remembrance. And here is the specific test. After spending time with someone, are you closer to Allah or further? Are you more at peace or less? Are you inspired toward goodness or pulled toward cynicism, negativity, and spiritual carelessness? Evil people often work on the spirit slowly. They don't attack your faith directly. They introduce doubt gradually. They make sinful behavior seem normal through their casual relationship with it. They make the serious seem trivial and the trivial seem consuming. Over time, the spiritual damage accumulates in ways that are hard to trace to any single conversation or moment. A man follows the religion of his close friend, so let each of you consider carefully whom he takes as a close friend. Sunan Abu Dawud 4833. This hadith is not a polite suggestion. It's a description of how human beings actually work. We absorb from our sustained environment. We are shaped by who we spend our hours with. The choice of companions is not peripheral to your faith. It is deeply central to it. If someone's presence consistently leaves you spiritually weaker, do not wait for a dramatic offense to justify creating distance. The pattern itself is the sign, and the sign is telling you something important. What Islam asks of you now, These 10 signs are not a framework for treating people with suspicion. They are a framework for reading patterns over time with the clarity that protects you. Not every person who makes a mistake is evil. Not every person who's had a difficult day and spoke poorly is a manipulator. People are complicated, and grace is required in any honest reading of human behavior. But patterns, sustained patterns of behavior that align with these signs are not accidents. They are revelations of character. And Islam does not ask you to remain in exposure to what will harm your peace, your faith, and your life. The Prophet ﷺ said, the best of people are those who are most beneficial to others. Al-Mujam al-Awsat 5787. The people closest to you should be contributing to your becoming, to your faith, to your health, and to your peace. If they are consistently doing the opposite, you have both the right and the responsibility to choose differently. Protect your heart. Guard your spiritual environment. Be deliberate about who has consistent access to your inner life. And make sincere dua that Allah surrounds you with